Look, everybody, right now it is 2021. I just did this interview with Scott Haugen, interview with Mark Corpy, got an interview coming with George Joy. This is all about Becharof Lodge and fishing on the Egegik River, which is absolutely incredible. One of the most amazing experiences of my life, to go up there and to see wild Alaska, to see the Egegik River the way that God made it, without a single road or line of electricity to it. Just two lodge areas and incredible wildlife and fishing. So it's already filling up fast. I don't even know their website address. Go to Google. It's not that hard. Becharof Fishing, Becharof Lodge, Egegik River. Two owners, Mark Corpy and George Joy, do an amazing job, and Scott Haugen describes it pretty well, but things are filling up quick. If you want to get in on 2022, get your name in quick. And then if you don't quite make it in the door, 2023, I think you'll be able to get into a little bit easier. So otherwise, enjoy this podcast with Scott Haugen, and we appreciate every podcast listener, and we ask that you would leave us a rating or a review or whatever you may do. We truly appreciate it. Without further ado, here is Scott Haugen. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Salmon Trout Steelheader podcast, brought to you by Becharof Lodge on the Egegik River in Alaska. Take a look. We've got you can see an ad in the magazine for them, as well as find them online. And I'm here with Scott Haugen. So, Scott, could you tell me about the lodge itself, first of all, and the river itself?
You betcha. Nice to be with you. I love your podcast. You guys are doing great work. Been around with STS for, oh my gosh, since the late 90s. In fact, someone told me the other day, they said, do you know that you write in your column for STS, that's the longest running column in North America?
No way.
Yeah. And I
Really?
said, that's what I said. No way. So I don't belong to any outdoor writers associations or anything like that. But this guy was in the Outdoor Writers Association. I was like, are you kidding me? So I've been writing for STS since the 90s and started a column back then.
As well as your wife?
Yep. My wife Tiffany, who does the cooking side of things there. So so this is nice to have the first podcast here. As far as this place here on the Egegik River in Alaska, I've been fishing Alaska for 31 years. This is the best coho salmon stream I've ever seen, year in and year out. Yeah. I wrote a comprehensive book called A Fly Fisher's Guide to Alaska. At the time, it was the most comprehensive book of its type, covered the whole state. So I've spent a lot of time traveling throughout the state, from the Yukon to the Arctic to the Bristol Bay, many Bristol Bay fisheries, all the way out, to Adak Island on the peninsula, throughout southeast Alaska. And like I say, year in, year out, this has been the best fishing I've seen. The easiest river to fish, but and a lot of fish in the river. They don't do a run count like they do with the Sockeyes here, so you don't know. So, sometimes you'd say there's 4 million fish in the river. And then when the bite goes off, you'd say, where are they? Yeah. I first started fishing this river in 2007. We were filming a TV show about a quarter mile from where we're sitting right now doing this podcast, and there was a rock, and I stepped out there, never made a cast on the river. I had 4 rods rigged, ready to go, had shooting a show for the Outdoor Channel, had a camera crew with 2 big cameras, said, hello, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to show you 4 different ways to rig up and fish for steelhead. One was drift fishing, one is bobber and jig.
Steelhead or coho?
Or I'm sorry, coho.
Okay.
Yeah. And fishing coho here. I'm going to show you 4 different ways. One was drift fishing, one was fishing bobber and jig, one was the drift fishing was eggs, one was fishing spinners, and then fly fishing. So I stood on that one rock and we rolled tape for about 5 hours, and I landed 77 coho.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, holy cow, are you kidding me? It was, so I fell in love with the river at that point. Since then, the lodge has changed owners. There are new owners as of a couple of years ago. It was a tent camp. This is remote Alaska. This isn't your fancy $10,000 a week, camp. But what you're going to get here is you're going to catch a lot of fish, and you're going to eat really, really good.
It's strange when you're looking forward. I mean, I love the fishing, but you're looking forward to that dinner so much. It's just so good. Great company.
Yeah, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Yeah, Joni, the cook here, is great. The two new owners, George, now Joy, and Mark Corpy. George worked for the former owner. I've known him for 10, 12 years. I've hunted moose with him, brown bear up here, fished a lot with him. George is the guy. He makes MacGyver look like a neophyte. You could give George a spoon and say, George, make a boat from this and get us home. Okay, he'll do it. Mark is a building contractor from Astoria. This used to be a tent camp. They put some cabins up, which has made it a little more comfortable, especially during those rainy, cold nights. And they're a great team. Super easy river to fish, fun river to fish, a lot of fish. And it's one of my favorite places to go. Like I said, 31 years in Alaska, and there aren't many places I go back to. But this is my 15th year of fishing here, and there's a reason I keep coming back.
Wow! So you came with the lodge when they bought it, pretty much. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit more, kind of general coho itself, and I'm sure this changes state to state, river to river, of course, but if you were to kind of describe how coho react and move through tidewater, do you see any patterns there?
We do. So the cool thing about Alaska, and a lot of people say, well, gosh, you can go up to Alaska, and Alaska is different than everywhere else. It's not different than anywhere else in terms of fishing techniques and presentations. What sets it apart from Washington and Oregon is the number of fish. So I can, the other day I went out and I was testing the new 40 millimeter BNR soft bead. I made, it took me 41 casts to land. I should say I got 41 hits to land my 5 fish. Then I went to another 32 millimeter soft bead, got 57 hits to land my 5 fish. So, if you think, okay, if you're doing it, and I'm doing studies throughout this whole river, and we have underwater cameras that we're doing work with and looking at how these fish are biting these beads and what angles, they're approaching from the side, from the bank side, from below, from the middle of the river. So we're studying where these fish are coming from and how long they're chewing on the bead and why they're not getting hooked. This morning I went out and I made 7 casts with the same 40 millimeter soft bead and landed 5 fish. Didn't change a thing. The distance from my dropper, from my hook to the bead was the same. Nothing changed. I was standing in the exact same spot of the river. Really? So that tells me that I have a lot to learn still. So what Alaska gives you is a huge number of fish and a huge number of opportunities to expedite the learning process. This afternoon I went out and I'm still scratching my head because there was a hole I was fishing that was just crammed with just crammed full of coho. And I thought for sure I could get him to bite on these different baits. Wasn't working. I made 30 casts with one bait, didn't get a bite, threw eggs out there, bam, I didn't even flip the bail, got a fish. Made 30 casts with another bait I thought would work, bam, didn't get a thing, threw eggs out there to make sure the fish were there. Again, it wasn't 6 inches under the water, got another fish. Made another cast with another bait, got 3 fish on that one, but I should have honestly been catching fish every single cast. So will people hear about that bait? No. Maybe I should write an article on baits not to try, right?
You could. Hey, I think there's validity to that.
Yeah. So I see a lot of these trends where I've fished waters in Washington and Oregon, but again, what Alaska does is it gives you such a huge conglomeration of fish to test in one area. On an incoming tide, on an outgoing tide, on a high tide, on a full moon, cold nights, pressured water. This is a very popular river because a lot of the silver rivers in the area aren't producing the number of coho they used to for, 5, 10, 20, 30 years ago. So a lot of lodges are flying out to fish the Egegik right now.
Really?
So there's actually some fishing pressure on this river. So, when you look at it in terms of the learning curve, when I can come up here and hook, 130, 150 coho in a day, figure how long it would take you to hook that many fish, in the Pacific Northwest.
Oh, man.
And the fish are the same. The water's the same. They bite the same. They fight the same. So many of the variables are the same, but they're just such a high volume of fish here.
Yeah. So like in terms of the tides, you could really see when they're moving and when they're coming through. And so what do you see incoming, outgoing?
So on an incoming tide, these fish make it. We're about a little over 20 miles from the salt, and we're still tidally influenced up here a little bit. Mm-hmm. The other day we had a big, it was like a 2.7 minus and a 17.2 high. So we had, about a 20-foot tide swing, pushed in a ton of fish, catching them with sea lice, very aggressive fish. Yeah. I'm doing a lot of plug work now. This is a very, very clear river. So, around 10 o'clock or so, just like any river, even though there might be, 5,000 fish in front of you, the bite can turn off. Mm-hmm. So a lot of what intrigues me is what can you do to get those fish to bite? Mm-hmm. So I love casting plugs. Casting plugs was big in the early 70s. It's what came to the salmon and steelhead world. Then so many people started back trolling them from boats and got away from casting them. Casting plugs can be very, very, very effective. And I've tested out an array of plugs. Maglips 2.5, 2.0, 3.5, 3.0. Remember the old wiggle warts, back in the 80s? So I have some wee warts. Was fishing those, did really good. The Maglip 2.5 was fantastic. Right behind that was the Hottentot, which is still today one of my favorite slow water plugs for winter steelhead. It was just lights out with a very slow retrieve. You just get that thump in the rod, you get the rhythm. Remind me a lot of the Bob Toman's, thumper, spinners. You just, once you get that rhythm with the current flow and the depth, and even the wind up here can influence, your running depth with these plugs. It can be lights out. Today I was casting an F4 flatfish, little tiny thing, one I use for trout, catching them in very shallow water and very clear water conditions. Mm-hmm. So, I still have some testing to do. I'll be fishing 3 or 4 rivers here over the next month, testing out some of these things and seeing how it's working. But it's all a learning process. But these are things that, just because they work here, to me, that's my affirmation. Now I'll go back home to Oregon, fish them later on this fall and see if it works down there.
Yeah. No, that's great. And it's been fun to try a bunch of different techniques. It's been fun to try a bunch of different techniques. So if you were going to kind of recommend to someone who wants to get into coho fishing, maybe 2 or 3 techniques to start with and learn and try, where would you point them?
I guess it depends where you're at. If you're fishing buoy 10 trolling, that's one thing. Mm-hmm. For me, I would say nothing has taught me more about a river and how to fish, be it for coho, summer steelhead, winter steelhead, spring chinook, fall chinook, than drift fishing. Mm-hmm. Because drift fishing with just with the sinker where you're drifting and feeling the bottom, you learn the anatomy of the river. When you stand on a riverbank, you can pretty much look from bank to bank and kind of envision that's pretty much what the river is going to look like. Mm-hmm. But to really learn a hole or a section of river, I used to do snorkeling in rivers to learn in the summer when the water level was really, really low to learn where the rocks were, where the bedrocks, where the bedrock structure was, where logs were, any kind of structure to see where these salmon or steelhead might be holding in the holes where I was fishing. If you don't have the luxury to do that, learning it basically by way of telegraph, by drift fishing, is probably my favorite way.
And what would you have them put on there? Because I saw what you were fishing today.
Yeah, I've tried different weights. If it
or not weights, rather
gear,
the bait
gear. If it was me, if I was going to fish for coho, I'd go out there with like a pencil lead and a 2-foot leader and eggs and nice. And a little drift bob or a corky, probably just a little corky, on top of it. Something to give a little bit of buoyancy and lift to the bait. Coho are very aggressive. They'll travel up a lot for a bait. So I'm not convinced that in a river system where you're drift fishing them, that you need to keep that thing on the bottom. They'll travel a long ways for a bait. But what I like about the sinker is with like a pencil lead or some of the new sinkers you gave me today. The first time I tried those, what were they?
The Dave's Tango Free stick weights.
The stick weight. So I tried those. So I was fishing a slinky out in some pretty fast water, and there was a slot that I couldn't get into. So I put on the 3/4 ounce stick right there, and I mean that thing hit the water, sunk exactly where I wanted it to go, and boom, fish on.
That's cool.
So what those weights give you is the ability to precisely get that bait into the strike zone right when you want it, which I couldn't achieve with the slinky. I couldn't get it in there with the plug. I couldn't get it in there with the spinner. But you handed me that weight, said try this, boom, first cast. Nailed it. So I like those pencil weights. I'm going to be fishing these. These Dave stick weights more. I'm excited to try those.
How do you figure out how much weight you want to use? If someone's a beginner drift fisherman, they're trying it, what are they feeling for? What do you want to see?
So I want to tick the bottom. I want to feel the rocks. I want to feel the size of the rocks. I want to know their spacing. I want to know if there's a big rock, if there's a flat rock, if there's a shelf. You could say go to, this store and buy a $25 rod and a $25 reel and, get your line and go fishing. But I've found, over the last 50 years of fishing these things, the high quality rods, I love fishing the G Loomis IMX. I love fishing still the GL2s. Up here I'm using a lot of,
6X.
Yep. And I just love the feel of those. So basically, a rod, reel, line setup where you can feel the bottom. You're blind. We're really speculating what's going on out there unless you can do underwater camera work, which I do a lot of on this river, which confirms a lot of what I'm thinking. So for coho, I want to be delivering eggs to them. I want a stick weight that's going to allow me to feel the bottom, and if it's hanging up too much, I'll go with less weight. If it's not ticking the bottom, every 10, 12 inches, then I want a little bit more weight. Okay. You could even go with every 2 or 3 feet with a coho again, because they'll travel up, they'll travel from the side if they're aggressive. But I like a bait because an artificial doesn't trigger a bite like a well-cured egg can.
Yeah.
So that's what I'll start with. Or if I think they're a fish in the hole and I'm fishing artificials and I can't get them to bite, I'm going to go with that egg cure.
You certainly saw that today.
Yeah, you saw.
Yeah, and it's incredible. This morning, the bait bite that was going on, and we were actually free drifting eggs, which was awesome. And I just kind of walked down and side drift with it and stuff. But now, do you think, is it good to swing the eggs at the end?
With coho, I think it is, because you'll get your aggressive fish. Again, we've done so much underwater work with these, and you'll be drifting a bait or a jig or a bead, over 100, 200 fish, and when one fish locks onto it, it like triggers a predatory instinct, and there might be 2 or 3 or 6 fish on it. So I swing it all the way to the end, and I'll swing it into a foot of water. Because they'll follow it up there. I had a fish a couple days ago on the 40 millimeter BNR soft bead that I was trying out. Hooked him out, 40 feet out there. Got him, within 6 feet of my rod tip, and he came off. Just came unhooked. The bead was right up on the surface, and it was like third graders in a soccer match. Just everyone wanted to be around the ball. All of these fish just started boiling after the soft bead. I mean, it was going, 6 inches, a foot out of the water. It looked like a herring ball feed, but it was, these 6, 8, 10, 12 pound coho batting this thing around, and no one could get the hook. Just off my rod tip.
Yeah.
And what I would have given to have had video footage for that, but it shows you, and that was honestly in less than 2 feet of water. It was right there. So these fish, coho are incredibly predatory. And last year I was up here and we did a lot with the 32 millimeter bead, and people were like, that's way too big for coho. It's nothing compared to the eggs I use for these.
Yeah.
And even the 40 millimeter bead, that we're testing out. And whether that goes to market or not, I don't know. But we have already video footage from this season of those things just inhaling that. You cannot see the 40 millimeter soft bead in their mouth.
Wow.
And they're chewing on it, they're compressing it, they're holding on to it for a long time. And we're cutting the hooks off. We're cutting, we're just leaving the shank on, cutting it at the bend because we don't want to hook the fish. We want to see how long they're staying with these beads, and are they just, nosing them, bumping them and going. They're taking them in their mouth, chewing them, spitting them out. As soon as they spit it out, another one grabs it.
Wow.
So these fish are very predacious, much different than what I've seen with Chinook in Alaska and throughout the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah. Well, now, to me, it was a little... When I first saw those giant goofy beads that you had, I was thinking this is more of a gimmick. There's a bunch of fish. It's something, they'll bite just about anything. But what I actually witnessed was that those things not only worked as well as anything else, a lot of times they worked better.
They did. And I love their neutral buoyancy. Some of the shallower water we worked up here with the underwater camera, 3 feet of water, that bead wasn't 3 feet under the surface, and those fish were traveling up to get that bead. Some of the deeper water holes where we got it down towards the bottom, I'd imagine it's 6 feet of water, and it's probably down there 4 or 5 feet, and the fish are hitting it and hitting it and hitting it. And I'd run, I'd fish this one hole pretty heavily with plugs and with spinners, and wasn't getting any bites, and I was going to go to eggs, and I thought, well, I'll try this 140 millimeter bead, and I tied it on 8 casts, 8 fish.
Wow.
So just the sight and texture has a lot to do with it. I know some people have brought some beads up here that don't have that soft texture that the B&Rs do, and the fish are spitting it out. But when you get something that a coho is going to chew on, that's going to bring more coho. I had a couple people fishing around me today, and new anglers, which this is a great place to learn how to catch fish. I said, there was one husband and wife team. I said, when one of you get a fish up to the bank, the other one cast right next to it, because there were going to be fish there. And they just, time and time again, they were catching fish. These fish were all coming in, following this hooked fish. And again, like you say, you look at that 40 mil and you think, oh my gosh, that's just a gimmick. But I don't know, the last 3 days I've hooked well over 100 fish on it.
Yeah.
It might not be for everyone. It might not be for, for deep holes. I'm fishing it in 2 to 7 feet of water, riffles, back eddies, places where you could back bounce it. If you were in a little bit faster moving water, I think I'm just drift fishing it. But I like it. I like the size of it. It's not too big. Definitely not too big. I caught 3 pound little coho moving up here. You get a 22-inch long fish biting a 40 millimeter bead. It shows you what predators these fish really are.
Oh yeah. Now, B&R is obviously got great beads, but they also have way too many color options. So could you give like 2 colors to kind of start with for bead fishermen?
That one I caught the 8 on today was one that sat in my box because I absolutely did not like the color of it. And I was like, I'm not going to use it. And I don't even know what the name of it was. It was more of just a lighter orange, kind of a milked out color. Yeah. I love the model colors, the model pink, the model colored orange. Of course, the cerise is hard to beat.
Yeah.
I brought up all of the colors that they had in those and caught fish on all of them. They did well. So I guess the verdict is still out on that. The 32 mils. The 32 millimeter beads, they're taking over the camp. And people say, well, gosh, do they really catch, more fish than eggs? And we've had some pretty darn good anglers up here, far better anglers than I'll ever be. Guys, that have, lived fishing the peninsula for winter steelhead and up and down the Washington, Oregon coast. And a lot of them who are now just fishing straight beads instead of eggs. You can still fish bait on the Egegik.
Yeah.
And they said that they figured by the time they're fishing a bead, they can bring a fish in. You can keep 5 coho here and keep fishing. And fishing the bead, that they're catching as many, if not more, than on eggs, because they're not having to rebait, not having to clean their hands, not having to cut bait. You bring the fish in, you don't have to, go to shore and whatever, clean up or rebait or anything like that. Unhook them and get back to fishing. So there are a lot of people up here now who won't even touch bait. They're just fishing the bead, and they're having good success back home. And not only just winter steelhead, but also the coho. They're doing really well as fishing these things under a bobber for fall chinook.
Yes, really, and I've been seeing that quite a bit more, and had a friend who was smoking springers on them, and so it's pretty crazy to see. It's cool how some of these techniques are crossing species and such, and the twitching thing, of course, is very popular. And now, last year was really good catching chinook on them and stuff, and so. But this up here as a testing grounds, as you've mentioned, is pretty cool. And I don't know if I'm gonna give away your secrets on the baits that didn't work. But you tried some funny things. And actually, you did get bit on some weird stuff.
Yeah, we did. We got a few, and I could say, wow, use this bait. But, if I'm on this river and I know they're fishing a hole, and I was testing everything with 30 casts, if I'm not hooking 20 fish in 30 casts, I'm not happy.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got to have that hook ratio. Yeah. If I know I've stood on this river and I know I can make casts for 3 hours straight with eggs and hook fish or have bites every single cast.
Yeah.
Again, that's your learning curve. So I could come back and say, yeah, this bait caught fish and you should use it, but people won't even know what bait I use. They don't need to know, because it might work for them somewhere else where they're fishing.
That's true. That's true. Absolutely. Everything changes from area to area, but having that confidence of, obviously those eggs would be the gold standard for what to expect from the perfect bait. Yeah. And if the beads are measuring up very well, I noticed fishing, certainly, got fish on spoons and spinners and love it, but that would kind of turn on and off.
Yeah, it would. And you see that a lot with the coho throughout Alaska. And I fished them all over in the Yukon and the tributaries and the interior and all the way, like I say, down on the peninsula and a lot of the southeast rivers. And that's very typical, where you'll see a lot of coho stacked in an area and the bite just turns off. Mm-hmm. You're like, what in the world? I need to try this spinner, that spinner. And I've found nothing turns the bite back on like eggs. Yeah. It just, I'm sorry, it's just a good cured egg will turn that bite back on. And it might just take one cast to get that one fish interested in that smell. Several others follow it, and then your artificial fishing for the next half hour, 45 minutes is lights out. Yeah. And then you think, oh my gosh, all the fish left. You're not seeing them rolling. They're not jumping. You're not feeling them hit your line. You throw an egg out there, flip the bail. Bam, they're still out there, and then you're catching fish again. So it's neat. A lot of rivers I fish in Alaska don't allow bait, so you're strictly limited to artificials, and so many times I think, oh my gosh, if I could just throw an egg out there, just to not see if there's a fish out there, but to get this predatory instinct, they're a schooling fish, get this predatory instinct triggered to where then I'll throw spinners out there, to get it turned on. So, when you think about fishing back home, if you're fishing whatever, tidewater or rivers, the plugs aren't working, the lures aren't working, get a bait down there somehow, drift fishing it under a bobber, back bouncing it, whatever you have to do to get some scent in the water. I think you were using some anise oil today. Yeah. My favorite scent. I used it for wolf trapping in Alaska. I used it trapping. It's my number one scent for trapping wolves and coyotes and fox, and it's my number one scent for curing eggs.
Really?
I've found that nothing, I've had no scent that performs as well for me on salmon from river to river as anise oil, placed on artificial lures, used in my egg cures. Yeah. And you were fishing lights out with that.
Yeah, I started sticking it. The nice thing about those soft beads is just stick a scent bottle kind of in the main chamber, and it would do that. But it was strange where because it was oils, it'd wash off pretty quick, and I would have to keep applying it to get the bite.
Would you?
But it worked great because there's a big old oil slick coming off it, and that got them going. But I definitely saw the egg effect, and then also eggs with beads. Doing a lot of that. That's cool.
And some people will say, "Well, that's cheating. You don't know what's catching them, the egg or the bead. You're trying to catch a fish.
Yeah,
it's not cheating. That's like using a flasher with a with a herring. Well, that's not cheating. You're using an attractant to get the fish to the bait, and a lot of anglers love that up here.
Yeah.
Again, the bait is that's your scent factor, and these fish have such phenomenal noses. Why not capitalize on it?
So when you were first coming to Alaska, what were techniques like?
So growing up fishing in the the 70s and 80s throughout the Pacific Northwest, it was a big drift fishing show. Early in the 70s, a lot of the plugs that came to the salmon and steelhead world, you'd see people casting them from the banks and from boats. Then it went to a back trolling approach, which is still what most people use. And I tell you what, casting plugs from the shore is it's probably the most ferocious bite you will get with these coho. They just absolutely annihilate it. My favorite plug to cast for these coho is a mag lip, and I love the 2.5, the 3.0, and the 3.5. I've been just hammering them in really shallow water in a 2.5 this season.
What colors?
I love the cerise. And anything cerise and anything cerise. Anything like that. Bluebill, blackbill, good. But I love that color. But what I love about the 2.5 is it floats. A lot of these coho will hit on the surface. I fish surface poppers a lot. Yeah. Had a little lull in the wind this morning, and I had 9 boil after a surface popper that I was using. And landed 4 of those. I've had days where I've landed over 20, on the popper here. I love popper fishing them, but with that mag lip, it floats. You can cast it out there, just dead drift it, just let it float. Reel it a crank or two, and it'll dive a couple feet and come back up. I've had several fish take it on the surface, but it's a really easy plug. To retrieve slowly, whether it's fished directly in front of you or downstream a little bit in a soft current I'm talking about, not a hard current right now. So that allows you, the fish are just really aggressive, and it allows you to cover a lot of water. It's really neat because I think, and I've tried a lot. Remember the old Hottentot? I love the Hottentot for very, very slow water winter steelhead, cold water. Fish that have moved, into the slack water to rest. I love the Hottentot. Hottentot has been on fire for me up here, casting that thing. Remember the old wigglewort, and I've been using the wee wart, the mini version of that.
It's funny you say the old wigglewort.
Yeah.
Because it's very popular where I'm from.
Yeah, still.
You go to the Cowlitz or Lewis, and it works.
Still
it works
using
amazing.
it. So funny where I used it, down in Oregon, in the late 70s, early 80s, whenever it was, and some of those guys talk about it. No one uses it there anymore. Really? But the wee wart, I was just having a really good time.
Why would the plugs fall out of fashion? They're effective.
They're very effective, and they're fun. Yeah. And with some of the braids that are out there nowadays, I love for casting these little plugs. I caught a limit today on a F4 flatfish.
I think it's teeny.
Well, yeah, one I used for trout. Yeah. So I just used the Max Quattro line. It's 60-pound braid, but it's 4-pound diameter. You can spool that up and throw that little plug out there as long as there's not a headwind. Yeah. And like I say, I caught a limit on that today. 30 series and a 50 series hot shot. I've caught a number of fish on both of those this season up here. And the hot shot was a big casting plug back in the day. Yeah. So the thing, I think one of the things that I see wherever I silverfish in Alaska, and I have 3 or 4 more rivers to fish over the next 3 weeks. I'm traveling to different parts of the state. But one of the things that I see so many anglers do is they have waders on, and they're going to get their money's worth and wade out to the belt. So many of these fish are so close, you don't need to cast very far. And that's where I think a lot of people think these plugs, that they have to cast halfway across the river. These fish are traveling close to shore. They're holding close to shore. You'll see a lot of fish rolling outside In which case, that's where it's nice to, with the beads, like we had a big wind come up, and I saw you switch to the bead, and you were casting farther than you could catch spoons, and every cast you were getting them on the bead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it was so strange this morning at the other hole, seeing how incredibly close they were. I was also fishing at the mouth of a creek there, and I got a couple fish, and then I go walk over there. It was a foot deep. I couldn't believe it. They were in there and they were biting, and it was so cool to see. So it has been surprising. Now, up here I noticed they're obviously not line shy, and with certain techniques down where I'm at, like twitching in dirty water or plugs, would run straight braid, but I'd be pretty terrified to do that on like a spinner or spoon, but we're doing it. Now, do you do the same thing down there, or do you go more leader sensitive?
I'll go. It depends what river I'm in and how clear it is and how low the water is. Mm-hmm. But even down there, I'll go straight to a braid. Mm-hmm. And I've just found they're not leader shy. Yeah. It's just you trigger that instinct.
Well, what were you telling me about the pike situation there? So
I like pike fishing. Mm-hmm. I've fished a number of rivers off the Yukon and the interior, and you're getting into some of these big rivers with sloughs where they're you're catching 20, 25 pound pike, and you're like, oh, what the heck? We'll just keep the same 5-inch spoon on there with the same steel leader and just keep working our way out to the mouth and go to the next slough, and pretty soon the silvers are hitting it.
Wow.
So this is a steel leader, 5-inch spoon with a giant treble hook, and these in crystal clear water, and these fish don't even care. And again, a lot of people might say, well, that's Alaska. Mm-hmm. Well, a coho is a coho is a coho, mm-hmm. and they're aggressive. And if to me, it's all about the right depth, the right speed, getting that reactionary bite to happen. Kind of like playing with your cat. Mm-hmm. The cat's laying there, and pretty soon it sees something, or, a little toy you're playing with, or a little fur ball, or like my dogs love chasing the laser light. Mm-hmm. You shine the laser light on the floor, and it's like, holy cow, move all the furniture because the dogs are coming through. Yeah. It triggered that instinct. Same with these silvers, and I've seen it from tidewater to many, many miles upstream, up in a river. If you can trigger that predatory reaction, they're going to bite it.
Yeah. Now, before we wrap up, can you tell me a little bit about... Well, first of all, if you guys want to go on salmontroutsteelheader.com, you'll see Scott's articles and Tiffany's articles everywhere. But what about to find you directly and see about your booking service?
So, it's pretty cool because I've been, like I said, been fishing Alaska for over 30 years. And there aren't many places I go to up here or anywhere in the world twice. Mm-hmm. I love new experiences. But this place, like I say, 31 years of fishing Alaska, this is the best coho stream I've ever seen. Yeah. So I started, bringing a few groups up here. So then I started doing some bookings and have created a little booking service where people can come up and fish with me. I love fishing. I love going out brown bear viewing at Brooks Falls. Mm-hmm. Usually this year we haven't seen many brown bears. Last year we were seeing 6 or 7 brown bears a day, every day on this river.
Wow. So
that kind of fluctuates too. I just love it. It's kind of like an open tundra. I love the freedom of it. The most beautiful sunrises and sunsets you'll ever see. There was a volcano erupting not far from us here the other day that was pretty cool to see. So, and a lot of fish. So you can go to my website, just scotthaugen.com, and look at the Egegik River. It's Egegik. Mm-hmm. Hard to pronounce, but it's the Egegik River Camp. It's not a big fancy lodge. It's a comfortable place to fish. We had a dentist up here a few years ago, and he first hour of fishing, and he said, holy cow, he said, I caught more fish in the first hour than I did at a lodge last year, and I spent over $10,000 at that lodge. So and fished it for 5 days. Mm-hmm. So the volume of fish here, if you want to go for numbers, catching 100 fish here is really not that difficult. Mm-hmm. Some people will come up here and they're like, we're all about the numbers, and after they catch 30, 40 fish in the morning and come back for lunch, you're like, holy cow, I'm tired. Mm-hmm. I just want to sit here and watch the ptarmigan, mm-hmm. Look for wolves, look for bears, listen to the sandhill cranes, and just enjoy Alaska. I love it. Like I say, it's not a big fancy lodge. You're going to eat well. You're going to catch a lot of fish. The people are nice. Everything runs on a generator here. Generators break down. Water lines break. This is remote Alaska.
It is.
This isn't going down to Buoy 10 and staying in a hotel. So you might miss a day because of bad weather.
Mm-hmm.
There are things that happen in Alaska. But if you really want to experience the kind of a trip of a lifetime in Alaska for Coho, with nice weather, great people, great food, this is a pretty darn cool place. There's a reason I keep coming back.
For sure. Now, spell your last name.
So, just go to scotthaugen.com. It's SCOTTHAUGEN.com. And you'll see it there. And you can email me there. My email is S as in Scott, T as in Tiffany. Haugen, that's HAUGEN, at yahoo.com if you'd like to learn more. We'll be writing another feature about this place coming up a little bit later in STS, maybe the December-January issue. I like updating folks. It's interesting. I've been here for a week or so now, and there's usually 16 people in this camp at a time. And at one point last week, 14 of the 16 had all booked from Salmon Trout Steelhead articles.
Oh, wow.
Some of them have been coming here for years. So it's really neat to connect with a lot of the readers and meet people, and it's just a lot of fun. Come up here and catch fish and have a great time.
Yeah, and the owners are great. They work their butts off. You would not believe there's not a single road out here. You got to float plane in or take a boat, and they built these and brought all the lumber in little fishing boats. It's pretty incredible. Yeah,
when you see it, you'll see why it was a tent camp for so many years, and then you say, wow, whatever it was, 30-some boatloads, haul at 30 miles up and down the river. And, there were times where they couldn't make it, or motors, gave out, or the tides, and winds were bad. So they spent several nights on the river.
Wow.
Here. And this, this isn't just stay in the boat. This is like, 50-mile-an-hour winds and, really cold. And, it's life and death stuff up here.
I got to give them credit, some serious credit. And then also you moose hunt and bear hunt around here.
Yeah, a lot of good moose hunting around here. I've taken a couple good brown bear around here, 10'9" brown bear that I got, 23-year-old bear, not far from where we're sitting right now. Mm-hmm. A lot of wildlife around here, great place to hunt and fish. I've waterfowl hunted a lot right here. Have some great ptarmigan hunts all around this whole area, within 50 miles of where we're sitting.
Yeah. Well, I could sit and talk for hours, and so I probably should wrap this one up here, but we will be doing another podcast, hopefully here, before the end of the trip. Again, I want to thank Becharof Lodge and Scott here for the opportunity to come fish. It's wonderful. And if you guys don't mind telling your friends about the podcast, if they haven't heard it, send it over to them. And what you guys don't know is the comments really do help us. They help the algorithms. We love to see them. So if you don't mind shooting a comment underneath, please do. And again, highly encourage you to go check out not only Scott's website, but his books that he's written over the years and the columns. I mean, there's so much good stuff there. A bunch of it on amatobooks.com or on your website as well. And I think you'll autograph them if they order from you.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll put the stamp on it.
Yeah.
It's neat. We're a pretty small fraternity out there, and it's fun to meet people who share the same passion. And that's all I'm doing, just trying to share knowledge. And I'm just blessed to be able to do this for a living where I can go out and learn. It's all trial and error, and when I can share amazing places like this with people that